Okay, so I guess I'm going in a little bit blind here, but I guess you want to complain about stupid people on the internet in the context of derm?
Yeah, that's right. Um, yeah, basically, this has started with, it started with apparently people complaining about me, which is fine. That happens all the time. But one thing that really stood out to me, a bit bizarre, was it got to the point where it's about me being in the field of derm, and because I'm in the field of derm, it's like a suiting field for me because derm is just a field. What was the claim exactly that I don't want to misrepresent it? That it was like a brain drain field. That way more applicants to spots because money to work ratio is good. Mohs and Dermpath are some of the few medical subspecialties where you can clear $1 million a year while still working 9 to 5. Derm residency is also 9 to 5 with no call. That that specialty is such a big brain drain, to be honest, and gives insight into how the average medical student operates. Their personal statements are riddled with proclamations about wanting to be in medicine to serve the underserved, and their specialty choices are almost entirely centered around leveraging their board scores and grades to make bank while living in the cushiest life they can.
For context, should we show the first one? Because this is the
Oh,
second one,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at the first one right now. So this is from Our Destiny. Is that his official thing, or is this just a bunch of
Yeah.
retards?
No, that's the official thing.
Well, I guess those things aren't
Well, it's
incompatible.
both. It's really both in this case. But
So this one says
yeah.
still fuming about Avi, and it's categorized as a shit post. I'm assuming that's like a tag or something. I don't know. I don't use Reddit. My opinion on. Hmm?
It's a category, I think. I don't. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
My opinion
Yes.
on someone had never flipped as hard as mine did for Avi after finding out he voted for Trump. That shit about radicalized me. How fucking dare you single issue vote for another country as born and raised American? How is this not some double allegiance shit? Holy fuck, man. Was it worth it? To see more dead Palestinians? Like you haven't gotten your revenge? What the fuck is wrong with him? I'm saying this as an American Palestinian who's getting double fucked by this admin. Go live in Israel, Avi, if you don't give a fuck about this country. I'd rage at him personally, but the cuck has locked his Twitter account, and it's got 836 upvotes. So do you
Yeah.
want to say
Yeah.
anything about this before we make our way to
Yeah. Yeah.
the derm stuff that like grew out of this?
Yeah. Sure.
I still
Sure. I
don't fully
mean,
get how this all happens. You'll have to inform me
yeah.
if you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't really fully get how this all happens either. But I mean, in terms of this post, I mean, I don't know this person. I don't know who this person is, but apparently he flipped. I mean, how dare just to I guess respond? How dare I single issue vote for another country? I mean, I'm not voting for another country. Nor am I single issue voting. By the way, there's at least three major reasons for my vote. One is terrorism broadly, of which Israel is an important part. The other is pro-sentience concerns, and the third is the insidious takeover of leftist ideology and identity politics in our academic institutions.
And
It's not good.
are those all sufficient conditions individually?
Uh, at least these pro-sentience concerns. Well, actually, it wasn't. If I were living in a swing state, the pro-sentience concerns would be a sufficient condition if my vote really mattered. If I'm living in New York where my vote doesn't matter, then really I don't know if any of those things would be sufficient. It may depend on how easy it is for me to vote. It was easy for me to vote in 2024 with a mail-in ballot, so I did it. But if my vote really did matter, then I think either at least the first two, the X risk of terrorism and the pro-sentience concerns would be sufficient. So it wouldn't be a single issue. I don't know who would categorize me as a single issue voter. It's not.
Well,
So
clearly a person who really knows your position and made sure to understand it before raging about you on a Reddit thread.
Right. Yeah, and then voting for
Well, wait,
another.
before we move on, let's just spend a little time there because I don't think people are gonna track most of that. One sec, I hear some water shit, and I just want to make sure it's not raining through my window. Okay, sorry, I don't know what the fuck that is. Yeah, so just to be clear, we should clear up the reasoning on each of those, even though it'll take a moment. So the first is basically terrorism as an existential risk. So I know your rough reasoning is going to be just that game theoretically, if you think terrorism is becoming increasingly dangerous because of increasing access to deadly technology, maybe like AI, synthetic biology. I'm not sure what your top fear technologies are there. I'm sure AI is in there. Maybe drones. I don't know. Some automatic weapons. I'm not totally sure. You can talk about that. I guess the idea is if the danger associated with these things is going up and up, and the ability to access them, I guess maybe that's just part of the danger. It's going up and up. Then the importance of just annihilating anybody who would use these for terroristic purposes early, as in nipping it in the bud, becomes increasingly important because you pay a kind of higher cost the longer you wait to do that. So I'm assuming that's like roughly
Yeah,
in the ballpark.
that's rough. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So yeah, I mean, so the existential threat, like many, just like any other proposed existential threat, is not like in the immediate short term. I don't think anyone, just like I don't think anyone's arguing that AI is going to destroy everyone tomorrow or in a year from now or 5 years from now.
You'd be surprised, but
Okay,
we'll set that aside though. Yeah,
most people, I think most people on the side of alignment concerns and everything are not. I don't think they're claiming that doomsday is happening in 1 year or something. They're I imagine they would say something like, okay, I don't know exactly when it will happen, but like we have to plan for the long game here. We have to, there's potential risks down the line. That is what I imagine most would say, unless I'm wrong about that. Do you think that's inaccurate, or do you?
I haven't looked at the timeline data. So I'm not sure. I know some people have near timelines. I know some people have further out. So there's like a spread. I think it's like a bell curve.
Sure. Okay, well, in any case,
generally people are putting serious concerns anywhere from like next few years to like next few decades. But don't quote me on that. I haven't looked.
Okay, sure. But so the point is that there is some sort of range, and it's not like immediate. It's there's a future forward thinking here. So
some people think it's pretty immediate, but whatever. Yeah, I don't think the majority opinion is that it's like going to happen tomorrow. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So similarly with terrorism as an extras, the position is not that tomorrow someone's going to get a nuke and blow everything up, or that a year from now someone's going to get a nuke and blow everything up. I don't even think this may happen in a decade or 2 decades, for that matter. It might, but I don't think it will. The view is that but it might in 50 or 100 as technology increases. Just as terrorism is the ability of terrorism to inflict damage is a function of technology. If you only have knives, there's a limit to how much damage you can do. If you have a car, you can do more damage. If you have a machine gun and bombs, you could do.
I'm going to push back sometimes a little from the other side. There's going to be people who are going to want to say it's a multi-factor kind of thing. Sure, that the power of the technology, access to it.
Yes. No, it is. We could grant it's multi-factor. Yeah. Of course, it's a. Of course,
remember, you're talking to YouTube. If you don't hedge everything, you miss those points and didn't understand them and are an idiot. So.
Oh yeah. We're talking to the audience. I see. Yes. So obviously, there's there's various different variables that go into the amount of damage a terrorist can cause. However, as you scale up the technology one, so long as those other variables that meet some sort of sufficient standard, such as they go through, now you're in the face of a terrorist who has access and willing to cause terrible damage with the technology to do so.
Yeah, and
And
people sometimes need a little intuition pump on this stuff also because they don't understand X risk and they don't understand much about AI. Like I don't claim to be an expert on AI or anything. I guess theoretically I might at some point be able to do that if I do a masters on AI stuff, which it looks like I'm going to do, but I don't know a massive amount about AI. Basically, right now you have to have quite a lot of compute to run powerful AI. So if we wanted to do stuff like tracking of, you can look at proposals like Magic, the multi-generational artificial multinational artificial general intelligence consortium. That's like a proposal. They want to do stuff like tracking GPUs and where compute is going, who has it. But you'll see even in proposals like that, um, there's like a caveat where we might find ways to do similarly powerful stuff with far less resources, and things become a lot more scary in that kind of case if you can run very powerful AI with fairly limited software, hardware. So yeah, there's pathways by which it can become easier to access AI. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, you just need some shoddy little computer and you can run a very dangerous AI on it. I mean, any decrease um in how much compute you need makes it easier for people to build up that amount of compute. This should be kind of obvious. Um so yeah, and of course the fear isn't always just rogue agents. It could be states. It doesn't have to be an individual.
right,
But the
although I
point
do
is,
think that the baseline probability of a rogue, a non-state actor, in terms of their willingness to do certain things, are are higher, are really higher to the point where they're not really that comparable to state actors. But still, yes,
yeah,
if
but the access is going to be higher when you have groups like states or
yes, yeah,
organizations.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm just talking about in terms of their willingness to do something. Like
Yeah,
if I would ask me the question, yeah, who's willing to completely destroy the world? And it's probably like of the list of things, it's probably not going to be a state actor, even if it's like Kim Jong Un or something, or if it's or Putin. I don't think they ultimately want the entire world to burn. But if you were to ask me certain, non-state actors, I would say, oh, well, this one actually might very well want the world to burn.
yeah. So I understand you're saying that if you just random sample organizations or maybe states versus individuals, you think you'll get a kind of higher amount of individuals who will be willing to or want to just wreak insane havoc and destroy shit. Um,
Yeah,
and I mean, let's just grant that, like, or we don't even need. Let's just keep talking. So, also, you can factor in other things. Like you might think, oh, it's infeasible that really powerful AI will ever be able to run on the kind of hardware that would be easy for an individual to accumulate. I'm not convinced that's true, but that could be true. So then you might just kind of by default be more concerned with groups that have more resources. Um, but either way, like I mean, this is all kind of getting into the weeds, and I guess getting into
the point is technology. As technology increases, it also impacts the other variables. The
yeah,
variable
the
of technology can decrease the required needs of other variables.
yes, that's right. Yeah. And I mean the reason to zoom into the weeds for a moment there is not to get lost in them, but just for the mounds of retarded people basically who will assume if the weeds aren't mentioned that there's zero sensitivity for the weeds. Like, oh, it's multifactorial. Oh, this level of compute might not be achievable by this kind of actor. Oh, blah blah blah, right? We can zoom back out to the general point having that kind of stuff in mind. Like, look, still considering all of that, um you're going to have I mean, just the more dangerous the technology is, the more problematic it is. The easier it is to access, the more problematic it is. That basic fact will sort of remain the same.
Yes.
And then more generally talking about X risk is, I think, counterintuitive for people. I'm not sure if it's counterintuitive or just a thing people haven't thought about. But the idea with X risk is there's certain risks that are could be theoretically low percentage chances of them happening, right? And I think a lot of people will get fucked there. It probably is counterintuitive. They go, oh, low percentage chance, can't be that big a deal. But the whole thing is, if it's a low percentage chance of something incredibly fucking horrible, then it's really important to mitigate against that, right? Like, you might have, a 50% chance of something mildly shitty happening, like getting a cold, or you might have, a 1% chance of obliterating the entire future. And you're going to worry more about that 1% chance because sure, it's a lower probability than getting a cold, but the risk is existential, right? Existential risk normally means either destroying or sort of permanently trapping in a suboptimal condition humanity. And if people don't understand things like AIX risk, they should look into that, look into X risk more generally. But it's important to understand with reasoning about X risk or X benefits. There's arguments where you think about the other side of the coin. The important basic thing to have in your head is that the probability can be it can be very low, and the importance of dealing with the thing can be very high because the low probability is of something incredibly horrible.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have a bit in our heads about AI and about the dangers of individuals or groups getting their hands on particularly dangerous AI. There will be other technologies that are of interest here. And we have some sense of how X risk works. And we've shown some level of understanding that there are weeds there, so that we don't get the horde of stupid people. Yeah, we'll get that anyway, but yeah, okay. So with that all in place, why don't you talk about
Yeah.
whatever you want to talk
Yeah.
about?
So I mean, well, just to complete that thought, the point here is that given that it is important to just stomp out terrorism and set a standard, really set a standard to um, a global, really ideally, it shouldn't just be the United States. This should be just a global standard where it's if you are planning on engaging in terrorism or if you are a terrorist entity, uh, the entire world descends on you at at extreme costs. And that is just the standard that should be known to mankind, like just going forward. And that should be started early. We shouldn't wait until it becomes easy for rogue actors to have, you know, civilization ending technology. No, it needs to be started now. Like
Right.
the time, really
If
yesterday. Like
if
that's the
you
key.
announce that you intend to perform terrorism, if there's a reasonable basis to think that you're going to do it, if you are doing it, you are just targeted to get annihilated immediately, unequivocally, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You die. It's just that simple.
Exactly. That is the standard to set. And none of this other stuff, you're like, oh, well, but you think, you got to understand from the perspective. What about humanitarianism? Maybe we should, instead of targeting the terrorists, maybe we should give them, aid. What about that? Maybe we should give them food, like, or maybe we should give them, money or so, like what or any of this stuff. Like, maybe there's like, yes, or okay, I'll steel man them a bit more. I'll be facetious. Like, okay, well, what about collateral concerns? Yes, the collateral concerns are there, and again, because of the existential threat, the collateral concerns that we're willing to take are going to be very, very high. That's the standard I advocate for.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
You might hear, oh, 13,000 children, but in your mind you go 13,000 children. Bro, the other side of the scale is the future.
yes, exactly.
Right.
It's
Where it's yeah, right.
yeah. So
So
yes,
the way to push back against this, like this kind of reasoning, as long as there's any real basis for worrying about an X risk from this kind of technology, the only real way to push back is going to be stuff like, well, you're basically just going to have to argue that risk isn't there, or that the rate at which it's increasing is like so minimal that we can really take our time and stuff like that. And you're going to have to fight against sort of a certain level of precaution, because we need pretty high with X risk. You need pretty high conviction to make decisions. You don't want to, like, well, you don't want to bank on maybes in cases like this.
Yeah, exactly. So the it it's just that it's puzzling to me why people haven't put terrorism in the category of X risk pretty standardly before. Even though it seems like a pretty obvious thing, and it plays into every other like X risk, like whether you look at it in terms of a bioweapon, or whether you look at it in terms of some AI, or whether you look at it in terms of nukes, or all of these things are like X risk. But like, yeah, the most horrible thing about terrorism is that like all of those factors, like this is an X risk that makes use of the other X risks. Like this is if you have an entity that is has the goal of destroying the world, or putting it in some state where they're subservient to some like cult or something. They will use all of the things that we mentioned about other X risks that people are concerned about. They'll use an AI to do it. They'll do whatever they can do.
The basic thing here is that if someone wants to fight you on this, they're gonna have to say that the chance of any kind of group like that ever acquiring really destructive technology is vanishingly small, because the second you have even a small probability, your whole argument's going to go through. So they have to argue, they have to make a very, it's hard to argue against X risk stuff, because again, the small risk is going to justify massive action if the danger is huge enough. So they're going to have to fight you on the risk really being infinitesimal. Or if you think right now at this current level it's not, which you don't think this, or you do, sorry, you do think this. If you think right now at this current level it's not world threateningly deadly, which I mean, of course, we don't have AI like that, we don't have tech like that yet. You're gonna have to argue that the rate of increase in danger is like extremely slow. So basically, they're gonna have to say the risk is so small that it's not going
Even
to.
with policies that cut to terrorists and incentivize terrorist growth and growth of terrorist organizations, proliferation of terrorist groups. So even granting that, which increases power of terrorist groups, obviously, so it increases access of terrorist groups. Even employing those policies, like it still will be low. It still will be
Right.
too
Sorry.
so.
Yeah. We have to set their burden correctly, because if they're saying vote the other way and that's what the other side's policies are like, then they're gonna have to say, even factoring all that in, the risk is so minimal that we can't worry about it. And again, with X risk, you have to get very minimal before it actually starts looking like it's not something to deal with. So yeah, the way your whole reasoning is
Not,
going to be.
not just this will be right. It's like the risk, the long forward looking risk, based just to clear that up. To
Did I say something
yeah,
wrong? I didn't. Maybe I
no,
said
no,
something
you
wrong.
didn't say something wrong. It's just no. This is for the audience we're talking to. Like,
Right.
um,
So yeah, basic idea here is it's just gonna be like, if this thing is an X risk, then the the kind of game theory here is just going to point to eliminate it immediately, clip it in the bud, and the only way to fight against that is to say that the risk is actually so minimal that even using this X risk kind of reasoning, it's just not something to worry about. Even in the presence of policies that might, increase the risk, it's still so minimal that there's just no worry. That's how someone has to fight you on this.
yeah, and there's also worth pointing out there's some asymmetries in terms of like other X risks in terms of so AI, for example. You can make X there are X risk considerations for AI itself, but unlike terrorism, there's good things that AI brings to the world. It's just AI is can be very much more plausibly used to benefit, increase utility, whereas that really isn't there for terrorism.
Right.
So
Okay. Let me backtrack, because I think I didn't spell this out in a way that totally makes sense. So you might have X risk concerns on the other side too. They might think, oh, well, sure, your side minimizes that as X risk, but we have these other X risks, like just the X risk from AI full stop. Your side is being less careful about AI itself. Maybe that X risk is larger. So we have to pick our X risk. But the point is, no matter what, they have to. So I phrased it wrong in saying they have to argue that particular X risk is small. But what they have to do is basically show on balance that the X risk is smaller in the case that you go with their policies.
Right. There you go.
Right.
Yeah. And then just very forwardly, the case is um, just briefly that, yeah, I mean, when you have policies that incentivize uh, terrorist groups to proliferate, terrorist groups to get the things they want to get, versus policies that just straightforwardly just annihilate terrorists and do not negotiate with terrorists and do not, cuck to terrorists, that will plausibly influence the terrorists' ability to grow, ability to recruit, ability to access these weapons in the long run. If so, long run of policies that allow terrorist groups to proliferate or incentivize them to proliferate will increase the probability of them getting some sort of weapon like this in the long run. And policies that do the opposite, that give the full SAM treatment, anytime it rears its head, will decrease the probability of terrorists having the of getting some sort of civilization-ending weapon in the long run relative to that. That's the basic point. Or at least
But you
what.
you would be swayed if, for example, it were shown, at least on this particular point. We'll talk about the others in a second. You would be swayed if it were shown, for instance, that the Trump administration is so careless about the development of AI, and the other side is not, that the risk of the AIX risk just from development is sufficiently higher under Trump that it outweighs the um, the increased X
The
risk
increased
of
X risk of
terrorism given
terrorism
the
or
other
terrorism.
sides, given
Yeah.
the other side's
Yes.
policies.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And presumably you just don't currently think something like that.
Correct.
And why?
Well, I haven't seen. Well. First of all, I haven't really seen any real policies from either the Biden administration or the Trump administration on concerns about AI alignment. So,
I
relative
don't
to
know
one.
much about US politics, but I would picture the left-wing party. I don't know how it all works over there. Do you have little parties like we do in Canada also that don't actually get any of the vote? Should I technically say parties?
No, you could say either the two. There, I mean,
I mean,
there's
it's a
Libertarian and Green Party, but they're kind of memes. I mean, they
right.
are memes.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I know really it's a duopoly, but I'm wondering like, oh, technically or whatever. Anyway, um, I mean, it seems to me like generally speaking, left-wing parties are more concerned with things like public, I don't know, I want to say like public goods, public safety or something like that, and right-wing parties are more in favor of like sort of like tech development, push it forward, don't
Yeah,
worry so
that's
much about
very. I don't
externalities.
know. Yeah, I don't know about how that's going to shake out with AI here. I think that would be very speculative. I think that you may think that, but then there's going to be this weird, right wing may just be like, oh well, wait, we need to be very concerned. We don't know the long term effects. All of a sudden, like it'll be like a vaccine thing. Like, oh, this new technology, we don't know the long term effects. We have to be very concerned.
Right.
And
Well,
maybe that'll. I don't know how much that extends to AI. I don't know. Yeah, I don't. Well, that's to answer your question. I don't really see much reason to think when it comes to AI that one party is going to be more conservative in the development of it than the other.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm trying to be really charitable
And
to.
even if they are, I haven't seen like a degree of like that's going to be a massive spread, like or a big spread that's going to be concerning. I haven't, and again, a lot of this is like I just haven't. There hasn't been any policies
Right.
from any of these administrations about curtailing AI. Like the Biden administration has not, to my knowledge, put out any policies in terms of alignment concerns. The Trump neither has the Trump administration. Uh,
Soph could comment on this. Maybe I'll get her in here.
yeah, um, but either way, I mean, so but the point is that yes, if it were shown that the Trump administration had some policy to just full throttle AI and never have
Here,
alignment.
I'm gonna add her. We're just gonna have to rejoin.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All right.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the position is pretty simple. If it were shown that there was a good reason to believe that the Trump administration would have a degree of carelessness, not just carelessness, but full throttling AI with no concern for alignment, and that would not have been the case. That or with a different administration that I did not vote for, then yeah, sure. It's just that I have no reason to see that no one's made any policies on this. No, to my knowledge, no one has even really said much about this. To my
Yeah,
knowledge, but what has been said is of the terrorism. Like we have had
right.
lots of statements about terrorism. That's the difference. there's
Yeah,
there's data on terrorism for me to work with. I have lots of policies about terrorism from both administrations.
right. Yeah, so I mean, I guess the reason I sort of try to be really charitable to the other side, like I guess it's just because I lean in your direction. I mean, I'm obviously not a U.S. citizen, and I don't actually think too much about politics. So I'm always kind of all my political opinions are like not particularly strong, but I even absent a lot of the AI stuff, I just lean really heavily by disposition in the direction of like, oh, if you announce you're going to kill people, you just have to die. Like that's just not a thing we can tolerate, and we need to set a really clear standard there. But when you factor in the AI, I mean, and when you start thinking in terms of X risk from terrorism just increasing, I mean that just further makes me lean in that direction. So I just start thinking like, okay, well, what's the other side going to want to say? Because this is starting to feel compelling to me. And yeah, I mean, I
I mean,
think
look,
that
you can make a case that like the left administrations of the left will make it more likely for to not just develop AI, but have the terrorists have access to AI just because like they may want to share it with terrorist countries like or terrorist countries where terrorism is rampant. Like they'll be more in line with some sort of Iran deal or where if you just promise us to not have nukes or something, we'll give you some, we'll help you with AI tech or something. I don't know. But maybe that won't happen. But I would be more surprised of a right wing administration agreeing to something like that than a left wing administration. Surely.
uh if it was something like a deal with Iran to like give them dangerous technology for whatever kind of reason. I mean, I just don't really know enough about US politics, so I'm not sure like are both I again, I'm not really going to comment on that. I just don't know, but I'll just say this. Like what's my motivation for trying to bring up the other side? It's just that, I lean a bit I lean in your direction because again, I have this natural strong disposition against terrorism. I just naturally think we should just kill those people immediately and mercilessly. That's just where I'm at by disposition. And then when you add the X risk, I just lean even further in that direction. So I start thinking, okay, well, what's the other side going to want to say back? And I don't think the pathway of arguing that the risk is just so small that we don't have to worry about it is viable. Like, I think that you have to make all sorts of really speculative arguments about technology and about how we're going to do AI and about it. It's always going to require a massive amount of compute. We'll have good tracking of that. We'll be able to manage. You kind of have to do all that, and I'm just not confident about those things. So it looks to me like the case the other side would have to make that would be persuasive to me would just be like, okay, we accept what you're saying, but we think that on balance the X risk is still higher on your side. We're going to have better policies, and then the best I can get to is just kind of thinking, the at least right now. Again, I don't know a lot about politics, but I just kind of
Just the
think the
speculative hope that the left is going to be more cautious than the right on the issue.
basically, yeah, exactly. There's just a bigger like just because you just have these sort of themes where like the left, you might say, is maybe in some way more concerned with like the good of the whole or the underdog or maybe society in some, like, because and on the right you have more like let industry do its thing, kind of let more externalities happen. That's the impression I have, at least. But yeah, what you end up with, even
And
if you
yeah, but
give
just to
all that,
push, just to push the.
I know what you're
Go
gonna say, so let me just say what I think you're gonna say in response to all that. So I think the pushback is basically just gonna be like, okay, well, that is not particularly persuasive because we don't actually have any policies to look at to indicate this. It might actually literally go in the other direction. It might be more likely that the left is problematic. And either way, it's not actually clear that even if there is a difference, whichever way it goes, left or right, that it's a large one. So for all those reasons, we should just be more worried about the thing we actually do have data on, which is the terrorism X risk.
You're right, and so that's all true. The only one thing I would add is that I do think that if at the speculative level, even at the speculative level, um, I don't think I think that the right does resonate with technology being leaked to foreign actors and terrorists and such. They do want to promote technology. They do want to let the industry do its thing, but they are, I think, willing to set certain standards if that technology is at risk of falling into the hands of foreign actors or even foreign nations. I don't think if it's like they would just shrug their shoulders of like, okay, China's just going to get the technology now, like, so it just gets like free access, and they would be like, wait, no, like, no, you don't get that. We worked for that. Like,
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing I expect the right are going to resonate with. And especially if you say, okay, well, now it's not China getting that. Now it's just a group of terrorists who want to destroy us getting that. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, oh, okay, well, that is a concern. Like, they want to protect their, and this is just how companies operate. They want to protect their technology. They do the things that they need to do to protect their technology, whether it's a patent or whether it's like a whole tech service on making sure it doesn't leak or something. Like, there's a whole bunch of there's a lot of concern and effort in protecting technology and keeping it yours. So yeah, I think even at the speculative level, those on the right, there's reason to believe those on the right may resonate with it, especially if you add in certain elements of like, okay, well, now it's not just a foreign entity; it's a foreign entity of like, the sort of country that the right may not really like that much. So I mean, you add those factors in. There's again all speculative, but there's speculative reasons to go the other way.
Yeah, you're
So
like, hey, look, if you guys want to do speculation battle, I'll speculation battle you backwards. That's basically what you're saying.
right. In addition to everything else you've said.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, people can take issue with this and try to maybe they want to maybe they want to try to say the risk is too small to worry about. I think that's I don't think that pathway is going to pan out. Maybe they want to try to show the scale actually tips more in the other direction. That seems more viable. But the point is, it's not some like unconsidered like silly fucking opinion. Like you I mean, I don't even think any of these people criticizing you would even know that you are thinking about X risk when you're voting. Anyway, that's pillar one, and there's three of these. So and we're just dealing with this single issue voter comment right now. So the next one is sentience. Do you want to say anything else about the
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
stuff?
Oh, no. I think we've gone over the basics. I mean, it's not the purpose of the video is not to be exhaustive on all of these things, although we could probably spend a whole video on each one of these things.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. There's pro-sentience concerns. I think that is a little more straightforward. And I think this is something that I've been talking about for an even longer amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Although these people,
Which
their straw man of you is he used to be a single issue voter on abortion, and now he's a single issue voter on Israel.
right,
It's like no, it seems like it's a growing disjunction of
right.
sufficient conditions, and it's not just Israel, it's X risk. But yes, go ahead, yeah.
I wonder what my single issue vote for Trump 3 will be the next time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just there's a difference in policy in terms of a group of individuals that I grant the precautionary principle that they may have meaningful degrees of sentience, and they are being just killed. There's no other way to put it. They're being legally killed. I mean,
Yeah, and
so
your view basically is like Holocaust prevention is more important than whatever concerns might be on the other side, like ensuring democracy or whatnot. Presumably, you're like, I'd prefer a anti-Holocaust dictatorship than a pro-Holocaust democracy.
that's right. Exactly. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So on this one, if they want to fight you on this, they basically, I mean, it's basically just two things. They can either try to change your values and say you shouldn't care about
No, that's
like
not going to work. Yeah, with the way they want to do it, if they want to fight me on it, the way to do it is an empirical one where they would try to make the case that, like, okay, well, for some reason, there's an inefficacy objection. Trump's policies don't actually reduce rate of abortions of the subset that you care about, of the subset that you think have plausible,
yeah.
meaningful sentience relative
But
to the
just
other
before you
policies.
continue, I'm just pointing out what they can do, which is either fight you on your values or fight you on the facts, or
Yeah.
both. I agree the value fight is just going to end in ridiculous reductios on the other view and is just a hopeless pathway. But yeah, if there's a path, it's going to be the empirical kind of path. Like, oh, it's not, there's no meaningful change. And I'm just going to guess at what your view is here. I think you're going to say something like, well, it seems more or less neutral under Trump. He seems like he doesn't really give too much of a fuck about abortion or doing a whole lot about it, or maybe there's been some progress against it. But on the other side, they just want to make it legal. They're just like, increase the Holocaust. Let's go. So
Well,
presumably,
I mean, there's that, but there's also, I mean, keep in mind that the because of the actions of Trump, my understanding is that it has led to the repeal of Roe v. Wade because of the judges that the Supreme Court makeup during that decision. So, it used to be that there was a Roe v. Wade. Now there's not Roe v. Wade.
right.
And
So you
so,
think there's
yeah, I mean,
actually
yes,
progress against the Holocaust,
yes, yes,
right?
yes.
But even in the case
And,
that the
to be fair, like, it is true that Trump has, he's not in the direction of, like, pro-sentience legislation federally. He's kicked it to the states. He said, okay, well, each state can make their decision on how to legislate this issue. He's taken the very, lazy approach of, like, okay, well, to try to be fair, like, he make the case that it's not lazy. It's just what should be. But
well, basically
either way,
any time you agree with him, it's on based on broken clock is right twice a day reasoning. You're not signing off on his reasoning process on anything ever,
right.
basically.
Right. I mean, look, it's a headache that he gets to say, like, okay, look, it's not for me, it's for the states. A headache I don't have to deal with. So yeah, he's done that. But yes, you're right. On the other end, it's just like, no, we're not kicking this to the states. We're just going to make this a legal thing. Like, this is something we're going to make legal. We're going to destigmatize it. We're going to, we're going to promote that this is, like, the right of everyone to do. We're going to promote, like, access to it. We're going to, like, they're going to be, and we're going to have insurance cover it. We're going to do all of this stuff. We're going to just, yeah. So I mean, just our prior should be like, we have every reason to think that the policies are just going to, well, or at least we have many reasons to think that the policies are going to be in favor of just more abortions in these vaccines. And the data from everything that I've seen, all the data has panned out that way. By the way, like, that just with the different policies of more restrictive, you can make all sorts of cases that you want. You can make all speculations that you want. Maybe decrease access to birth control would outweigh that. Like, no, it doesn't. Like, actually, it's just when you look at the outcome-based data, the restrictive policies on abortion actually have ended up decreasing abortions. Sorry. Like, it just turns out when you make something harder to access, less of it happens at the end
Right.
of the day.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been bad arguments like, oh, if you make it illegal, people just do it in an alley. It's like, yeah, you make murder illegal, people go murder stealthily. It's not, but presumably you get less murder when it's not legal to murder.
Right. And that's
So,
generally, yeah, it's a hard, so the point is, the it's an uphill battle to make this case because all of the priors are sort of already against you.
To make the case that
and
the empirics don't work out in your favor, that it's actually
Right.
less or neutral abortion under the left
Yes.
policies.
Exactly. On my view, like all the priors go against this, and all the preliminary data that we're getting in go against it as well.
Right. So yeah, basically, to sum up your view here, you tell me if this is accurate. You view abortion as a very serious moral issue. You essentially view it as a holocaust of what, hundreds of thousands of sentient beings a year or something like that. I don't know what the numbers are.
Yeah.
And basically
in the US, that's in the US, but globally it's
right,
worse than that, but yes.
in the US, sorry. And basically, if you were gonna just argue about the moral side, presumably it would just be an NTT kind of thing. What's the relevant difference? And presumably that all is just gonna turn into insanity if someone tries to fight you on that. And then if someone wants to fight on the empirics, they have this battle that, okay, yeah, like under the left-wing policies, there's actually going to be less of this or neutral. And you just lean against that based on, you you named a few things, like your priors. What else was there?
There's been several publications of rates of abortion in response to different policies, like before and after different policies were instituted.
Right. So far we have two things that would be sufficient conditions, basically, for a Trump vote, on your view.
Yes.
Under the assumption that your vote matters, of course. We're not talking about if you're in a state where it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Because actually, that's what happened. Like there was a year where I just didn't vote because it's like I wasn't just wasn't really motivated to stand in line. I didn't do a mail-in ballot for whatever reason, and I'm in a state, still am, by the way, where my vote really is kind of symbolic. Which it is. It is a symbolic vote. It doesn't really matter. New York always goes Democrat, and they did again. And there's very so infinitesimally.
Let's just
small
change
chance.
the framing. Let's just say sufficient condition for you to think that it's the correct direction to vote, given that one's voting.
Sure.
Okay, Sophia is here now, who is an expert when it comes to some tech stuff, who I think works with AI and whatnot. So yeah, Sophia, we're basically going over some of these comments here. I'll copy you one. So this is like just some retards in the Destiny community shitting on Avi. So they're calling him a single issue voter and stuff, and we're kind of going through. He has these like 3 reasons for voting, or at least supporting a vote in the right the right wing direction. And it's basically X risk from terrorism, the baby Holocaust, and we're going to talk about institutions in a moment. And I just want to bring you in on the AI part, basically, because the idea here is like, okay, the left-wing policies cuck to terrorists, the right-wing policies don't. The right thing here, if technology is becoming increasingly dangerous and access to it is more and more dangerous, the right thing here is just to completely annihilate anyone who intends to do terror. Oh, yeah, the right thing to do here is just... Sophia, did you catch all that, or do you need a repeat? Her mic sometimes is a little fucked. I see you're unmuted, but your mic's doing the thing, so you might need to make that work.
All right. Well, I guess we can go on until Sophia gets that
She
working.
usually fixes it pretty quick. I mean,
okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I don't want to repeat that all again, but maybe I'll have to. Whatever. Yeah. Can you want to? Yeah, see, she's doing. I can tell she's doing the thing because she's deafened. We have this all the time. I don't know why it happens. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. There we go. Yeah.
Okay. Did you hear my explanation of the things, or do you want me to just say it again?
I mean, I mostly like catch the drift of it. Like, if we're just talking about Avi's in particular view about why the Trump vote is worthwhile. I understand like the overview.
Yeah, we've got two sufficient conditions for thinking it's the right direction to vote in already on the table. The first is X risk from terrorism. The second is the baby Holocaust. Obviously, I think you're already well familiar with his views on the second, but on the first, we sort of want to talk to you about some of the empirics. So basically, I think the idea is like the left wing policies cuck to terrorists and the right wing policies don't. And if you think that there's an increasing X risk threat from technology like AI improving, um, then the game theoretically right decision is going to be you want to nip that in the bud and basically just have a universal policy of if you say you're going to do terrorism, if you're doing terrorism, if it looks like you're going to do terrorism, you just die. And that's just all there is to it. Now, I was kind of pushing back on that from the left wing side. I was going, okay, how are you going to fight against that? So really, you can with any of these things, you can fight the values or the facts. So you can just say like X risk just would not it would not matter if we had AI destroy. That's obviously not going to work. So you don't want to fight on the values there. But in terms of the facts, maybe you're going to say, okay, the risk is just infinitesimal. It's like not feasible that we could ever have powerful AI running on anything other than like giant clusters, or that it could ever become accessible to like individual agents or some of these terrorist groups. Or maybe you give up on that whole pathway and you're like, okay, I can't actually argue that the risk is small. So there is clearly an X risk here on that is mitigated by these right wing policies. But let's even the scales by pointing out that there's also X risks that are increased under those policies. Like for instance, maybe the left is just generally more cautious about AI development than the right is. Maybe the right is going to have a more pro-business kind of attitude where they're not going to care about externalities or be sensitive to these things. Maybe the left is going to care more. And where Avi seems to be at with all of that is basically that's all kind of speculative. He thinks he can speculate just as well in the opposite direction, and he thinks the evidence we do have points to is on stuff like terrorism points clearly towards a right vote. So yeah, I guess I'm curious about your view on sort of two things and anything else you want to add in. The feasibility of powerful AI running on small compute, or by some other means becoming widely accessible or notably more accessible. And then also whether you've seen any real indication that the left is actually going to be more careful about alignment.
Yeah, as to the former, there are certainly many theoretical proofs that you can build an AGI for orders of magnitude more efficient in terms of compute than we currently do. And so we probably have like enough compute today to have an ASI, both from like algorithmic gains and from hardware gains that seem like they will come out eventually. Like there's no clear reason to think either one will stop. And I think that you could definitely get to the point where very clearly like NGOs, so you could, I mean, you can consider like Hamas, for example, would almost certainly be able to run an ASI in the future, but probably even smaller groups. And I think that that's just sort of like a widely acceptable thing. The other thing I'll say is that you don't need ASI for bio X risk. You can have very niche, narrow AI for bio X risk, and that's certainly like a developing field as well.
Yeah,
and in fact, that's sort of like the tendency in some environments right now is like steering back towards narrow AI because it's much more computationally efficient.
I'm worried some people are going to get lost in some of this jargon, so let's just get a few words out there and then please continue. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, we're talking about an artificial intelligence that can operate generally across multiple domains, basically can do what a human can do. ASI, artificial superintelligence, we're talking about an AI, an AGI, but which outperforms humans by an order of magnitude in any relevant measurable area of skill. And you said another that I forgot. Oh, narrow versus broad AI. So yeah, broad AI, we're kind of getting more like talking about general capabilities. It can do general reasoning. Narrow AIs are task-specific AIs, the AI that might do logistics, an AI that might do some particular, maybe like financial trading, facial recognition. It's specialized for some kind of purpose. And also, just if anyone wants to get all the lingo into their head and learn the basic idea of how this debate goes, the book you want to read is Super Intelligence by Nick Bostrom. Yeah, sorry. Continue, Sophie. I just worry about people getting lost in the jargon and missing all the value of what you're saying. So yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and so like we have a lot of like results in theoretical physics that would be very surprising if they were incorrect. That predict that not only is it the case that the brain is pretty inefficient, but that current models are very, very, very inefficient. And there's a lot of ongoing progress towards a sort of like bioidentical AI where we sort of copy what the brain did do as a starting point. And it seems like sort of this is like the, and you can explain this when you come back in, the like special molecule argument. Like it seems like eventually we should have the ability to copy like all the physical processes of the human brain. Whether that actually achieves consciousness or intelligence is obviously an open philosophical problem. But the brain seems to be computing some things, and it seems like we should just be able to at some point replicate that. But moreover, there's a lot of research being done in sort of non-bioidentical AI and hardware, and it seems like those things could surpass the relevant metrics for computational efficiency over the human brain, and that we very plausibly could get to the point where you have these NGOs or even smaller, possibly down to the individual level, running very, very intelligent AI systems, whether those end up being like AGI, where they have like a very broad general intelligence and can generalize from like a very large pool of knowledge, or if we just generate like highly specialized AI that are focused entirely on creating biological weapons. And one of the things that's been really popular in the literature and in deployment recently is this idea of distilling, where if you have a very, very large model, there are ways to, if you have access to the model, and even if you don't have access to the model, if you just have access to the outputs, you can train narrow models or much weaker models that are general based on those models in the first place. So you can end up having people have models that are like almost as powerful as these really, really large models at the fraction of the cost. So it's not clear to me that like what ends up happening is like it's only like the super wealthy or governments that have access to these really, really powerful models in the current paradigm. It seems like we probably need some further restrictions to get to the point where that's impossible. And if we're not doing those further restrictions, then there's a very large risk of people having these models that can develop like really, really powerful weapons. I think that's like one of the like broader risks that AI safety proponents are starting to talk more about, including the people who make the models. Like it's one of Anthropic's core focuses that bio risk is probably one of the first avenues in which these models will begin to become dangerous.
Right. Yeah. So this is, again, like this is why I thought it'd be good to get Soph here, because I don't know a lot of these details about AI. I have some basic intuitions. You know, I've done a good bit of programming. I've spent some amount of time with AI, but you know, when I hear something like when I think of these possible cases, like, oh, it's just not ever going to be feasible to run a particularly dangerous narrow model, maybe that does bioweapons research, or just a powerful general model on way less compute. I'm just like, okay, I've seen too much programming. I've seen what happens when people program. There's often huge gains you can make by just improving algorithmic efficiency, improving how the actual software works. And then you end up needing way less hardware. And sometimes those, I don't think non-programmers or non-tech people have an intuition for this, but sometimes those gains are like hilarious. You're just like, what the actual fuck? We can do this with that little fraction of what we were previously using. And then what once took a warehouse can happen in like the palm of your hand, right? So it's important to have that kind of intuition in place. But yeah, hearing Soph go over this kind of stuff more clearly, I think makes the point more. Avi, do you want to say anything before she talks about the political stuff? I'll reprompt you.
No, I agree with all that. Yeah. So I guess what I'm wondering is, I guess what I because from my perspective on assessing various risks of this issue, it seems very clear to me, or at least as clear as I could, about the different administrations and in terms of how they interface with the risk of terrorism. And there's a difference there. And I obviously favor one over the other. But what I haven't really seen is difference in policies. In fact, I haven't really seen a whole lot of policies at all about concerns related to developing AI, concerns about alignment issues. I'm looking for, if I were to look through Biden administration, Trump administration, like, has anyone put forward a policy about, how do we mitigate AI risk? Like, how do we mitigate X risk just of AI itself? And I'm just not seeing anything really substantial from any administration, which is different from the issue of terrorism. So I guess that's the difference. I was wondering if you saw any policies that were put forth by these administrations, and what those were, if there are any.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to reprompt you with. So, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so like X risk is obviously like its own very niche topic. The Biden administration did put forward an EO and some legislation related to AI safety, largely focused on export controls to China. Not so much focused on whether or not we would scale these models relatively quickly, although there was a little bit of that. That stuff has been undone by the Trump administration. So if you're looking sort of in this like short term, there's some evidence that the Biden administration was more careful, but I wouldn't like go on and say that it's clear to me that the Biden administration was much more careful or even more careful at all about X risk. Like, these are two very different categories. The one thing that I will say is that go ahead.
Let me just clarify. So there was a policy. What exactly was the policy in terms of? So I guess in terms of like exporting things to China, was that just a concern of like, okay, well, here's technology we don't want China to get it, or was this more of like a concern of like, okay, well, we need to put guardrails on like how fast we're developing this until we know like we can like solve alignment or something along those lines, or anything related to that?
The Biden-Harris administration, not so much. There was some legislation that was attempted to go through in California that was more focused on that. Unfortunately, lobbied and was unsuccessful.
So just so I'm with you. So then, in terms of like policies by the Biden administration, nothing in terms of
not to the level of X risk. Like, there was some like sort of like, so it was only an EO, so not long-standing legislation, mostly just a directive towards the executive agencies about how they should consider the future of AI. And there was some pandering towards the idea of bio X risk, but it was only with respect to imports and the NIH, I believe, with respect to how they should screen data about like gain of function research or bio imports and exports in the future, but nothing focused on like bio X risk. It was more just like, we're starting to understand that this is a thing, and they talked about it in terms of like biological materials, but nothing like concrete. And there was not like anything talking about like actually establishing limits on training that was concrete with respect to X risk. There was some restrictions with respect to how freely companies could train up to a certain amount of compute. And just to contextualize like why that's relevant, AI models are largely, their performance is a function of how much compute you have spent training them. Like, if you almost think about it as like, how many iterations of like teaching a student a topic, the more you do it, the like better the student is going to get at it. And of course there will be like a non-linear curve to that. So like at a certain point you just have like diminishing returns as the student has like fully learned something. Similar to how AI works, where if you have a lot of compute spent, you get a better model in a non-linear fashion. And what the Biden administration did in their EO was sort of direct agencies to be aware of the degree to which certain companies in the States were spending compute. but there was nothing about like actually limiting how much compute these companies could actually use.
Right. So the motivation wasn't like, hey guys, we need to like really figure out this X risk future thing with AI. We need to like put some serious guardrails about how quickly we're developing it until we figure this out, or blah blah blah. Anything like that. It was just more of a it was a motivation of, how would you characterize the motivation?
Well, I think that there was like a little bit of talk about like in the periphery of X risk. I think there's a lot of hesitancy in the government right now to like actually buy into the idea of X risk. So they talk about safety in very vague terms. Like there's nothing concrete about what they mean by safe, secure, trustworthy. Like these are all just very flimsy notions. They're normative, really. And there's a question about like to what extent we can even define these things. And they have made no attempts to do any of those things. All that they sort of say is that like these models get more powerful if you have more compute. We don't know what to do yet, so we're going to like start paying attention to how much compute is being spent. But there's nothing concrete like actually focusing on we have only like ever trained a model this big. We don't know how to predict how future models will look, so we're not going to let people train above this until we know what it will look like in the future. And there was not even like anything rigorous about paying attention to how models perform past like new compute frontiers. So it's sort of like a very lackadaisical and like starting approach to even considering these topics. There was nothing concrete about X risk.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, and then so I really haven't seen much of anything. I mean, maybe there's like a little semblance of it on the left, and I guess maybe nothing on the right. I don't know so far. I'm not sure if there's any policies in are you aware of any? Well, I'll ask the same question for the other end. Like, are you aware of any policies before the Trump administration, or even something like Elon Musk said during one of his ketamine K-holes or whatever? Like, what were, you know?
Well, so Elon is like very openly concerned about X risk and has been for a very long time. Now, that's obviously like somewhat contrary to the fact that he is building and has built one of the most capable AIs in the planet and is very quickly continuing to train even larger and larger models. And comparable to industry standards, has like basically paid no attention to safety. Now, to some extent, that's because they're catching up. They are like just now in the past couple of months reaching the same amount of effective compute as other companies. So they could sort of say, well, these other companies did it, so we can too. But Elon Musk himself is very open about the risks that AI might bring. The Trump administration is complicated. For one, you can sort of view the EO being pulled back as evidence that the Trump administration does not care about X risk. But it should also be noted that it was pulled back not like specifically. It was pulled back because all the Biden EOs were pulled back, right? So it's not like there was like a targeted like.
Yeah, it's not like we're targeting. You're like we're pulling this back because we don't care about X risk. No, we're pulling it back because we just don't like anything with the name Biden on it. Biden, like Sleepy Joe, bad. Okay.
Yeah, but moving beyond that, he did sign eventually an EO. But again, like with the Trump EOs, some of them are very specific as to what they're trying to do. Others are a little bit more vague. And Trump did eventually sign an order that sort of was like, okay, whatever Biden was doing with respect to AI, ignore that. We're going to start pushing forward without care for barriers. That is technically an EO now, but it's not clear to like what degree that actually makes it like a lawless land for AI development, other than the fact that like there's no clear law out there that wouldn't just be, you know, like criminal negligence.
Let me just get clarity on that. When you say like, oh, there's an EO that puts no barriers, like, was there beyond the things you mentioned about just being aware that the prior EO that you characterized just like, oh, it's just like a lackadaisical, be aware of it. Were there any barriers before? Like,
well, no, not really, because like the EO, again, as we talked about, like some people would refer to them as guardrails, but we have to remember that, like, again, it was not very specific. It was sort of like, hey, my agency should think about AI moving forward. There was nothing in like the form of law, right?
So what was rolled back was basically saying we should think about it,
right? And the other thing too that I would say, a lot of people have pointed to this Trump EO that like Trump was saying we should remove the barriers of AI progress. that EO also called for an AI action plan. Now, it wasn't specified that action plan would actually have to care about safety, but there's sort of like implicitly notions of safety there. But the due date for that is, I believe, 3 months from now, and we haven't seen it yet. So it's impossible to say what that will look like until it's out.
So what I'm getting, and would you characterize this as an accurate overall impression? What I'm getting is that, well, both both administrations have not really breached both administrations have not really put forth policies to put real guardrails on AI development out of X-risk concern, and both administrations have in some way implicitly signaled about this, although they haven't really had the courage to make any concrete statements to endorse X-risk a concern, to endorse these issues. And to whatever degree to the degree that the Trump administration has pulled anything of the sort from the table, it was probably not because they don't care about X risk, or they recognize that the other administration cares about X risk, and they want to say, no, we don't. It's just because they don't like the other administration and they don't like Biden bad or something like that. Was all that fair characterization?
Yeah, a lot. Like the big part of repeals was Biden bad, and the current Trump is like, it would be, you could make guesses about what it will look like, but I think that the current Trump administration has been really unpredictable in both good and bad ways. So I would be very hesitant to even begin to sign off on what I expect that what the report will look like.
So then basically my overall impression, going back to where we were to Isaac. So yeah, that's the answer to your question, Isaac. I
do have one more thing I'll add.
Wait, the answer to which question is just so what? Oh, the empirical question for Sophia.
Yeah. Why? Right. No. Why? You asked the question is, why do I think there's reason for? Why do you ask me? Well, why do I not think there's reason to believe that the policies of the Trump administration will put a broader increase of X risk to the point that it outweighs terrorist X risk?
Yeah, to the point that it outweighs the reduction in X risk from their anti-terrorist stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, because this is
you're basically just saying the actual direct X risk policies seems like a wash. At best, we've got speculation. It goes both ways. It's just a confirmation of your prior position, like we already said. And as far as the actual data we have access to, which is the terrorist X risk stuff, that stuff leans right.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and the only thing that I'd add is that Trump is not the only player right now. The Congress has also taken an interest in AI. They have not been interested in safety whatsoever. And sort of worryingly, what the Congress wants to do, at least there's a board called the U.S.-China Relations Committee, and their stated opinion as of late last year was that the United States should engage in a Manhattan Project to race China to AGI. A lot of people have sort of viewed that as a little bit risky.
Sorry, whose policy was that? Who said that?
The House Republicans.
Oh no. There should be a Manhattan Project to achieve safety.
Yeah, so their key so their number one key recommendation for 2024, I can just read it verbatim, was that Congress should establish and fund a Manhattan Project-like program dedicated to racing to and acquiring an artificial general intelligence capability.
Shit.
AGI is generally defined as systems that are as good or as better than human capabilities across all cognitive domains and would usurp the sharpest human minds at every task. Among the specific actions the Commission recommends for Congress, and then it's sort of detailed, we should build nuclear reactors, we should build data centers, we should...
Now just let me get clarity. Is this what is the strength of this policy?
It's committee. So the people who are relevant in the Republican Party for thinking about this think that they should beat China to AGI is sort of how I would frame it. But it's not a broader topic in the Republican Party yet. If anything, I think Trump is sort of extremely forward thinking.
Well, wait. I just want to get clarity on what I'm trying to get clarity on is how impactful this is in terms of policy, in terms of what is this is this
even weaker than an EO?
Okay. So this is like a what like a, on the like a virtue signal? Like what are we putting
It
this?
it is a virtue signal by a portion of the Republican Party.
Okay. All right. So this is not like okay. So that's because when you say you put this out, people are going to be like, oh, well, this is like the official position of.
No. Yeah. All I was saying is that the legislative body is obviously very relevant since EOs can only go so far. I mean, at least in theory. The legislative body, though, at some point could take a keen interest in AGI, and in fact, they could just fund an AGI regardless of what Trump wants. And as long as Trump signs it, the executive would be tasked, per the APA, with funding and developing an AGI. So tracking the House and Senate is just as relevant to the question of Trump.
I do agree with that.
And that's just why I wanted to give like a status update there, is that in the only way that they've talked about it is in this select committee for their relationship with China. And their number one recommendation was to build an AGI. But again, I would rank that as a virtue signal rather than any motion towards policy. There has not been any discussion by Congress about AGI in this session.
Okay. And I'm just reading this, what it says. The commission considers 10 of its 32 recommendations. The recommendations of the report's conclusions. The commission recommends Congress establish and fund a Manhattan Project-like program dedicated to racing to and acquiring AGI capability. AGI is okay, so this is part of the China thing. Now, look, I mean, provide a multi-layer contracting authority to executive branch and associated funding for leading artificial intelligence, cloud data, and other companies and others to advance and stated policy at the pace and scale consistent with the goal of U.S. AGI leadership, and direct the U.S. Secretary of Defense to provide a defense priorities and association of DX rating to items on the artificial intelligence ecosystem to ensure project receives national priority. Okay, so now in fairness, there is a case to be made that if China is racing to it, that we probably should be racing.
Sure, yeah, no contest. I think, going back to game theory, that we could obviously talk about brinksmanship, or whether we should just both try and recede. But if China or other actors who the United States should be worried about, especially those that might have close terrorist allies, obviously the U.S. should be highly concerned about that, and it may be strategically optimal to race to an AGI.
Yeah, if we're in a condition where the other side is racing and there's just no choice, then we have to race because we have the better chance of producing one that's aligned with our goals than the other side does, obviously. But
yeah, the only thing I'd say here is that
well, wait, let me finish.
The way to read this, sorry, go ahead.
What you actually want, obviously, is collaboration. What we want is something like CERN or like the International Space Station. We want a collaborative, highly secure project. You want like a big facility that's got like massive security, total internet lockdown. It's a huge international collaboration between tons of experts. There's clearly laid out safety parameters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to highlight one thing before you continue, so which is also just some people might think you have to be really concerned. You have to have a really high P doom. It's the language that gets used here. You have to think the probability of doom from AI is extremely high to be really concerned about mitigating this AI stuff. And I just want to emphasize the X risk point again. Whatever it is, whatever the kind of moral valence of the AI, that the AGI that we build, the ASI that eventually comes about is, whatever it is, it's going to massively change reality one way or the other, right? If it's aligned, then it's great. We get an end to all disease. We get mechanical bodies, eventually virtualization. We get a big Dyson sphere around the sun and just emulating as many happy minds as possible, living worthwhile lives, expanding out in 360 degrees to spread across the universe, just seeding consciousness and happiness, eating up all sorts of matter filled with suffering like planets and stuff like that, and instead just building positivity. That's the good situation. The bad situation is it comes out misaligned and it does something like just eats up all of the resources for itself, covers the surface of the planet in computonium, or just fully disintegrates the planet, uses it for its own purposes. Doesn't give a shit about things that we care about, doesn't care about our values, and potentially isn't even sentient, and just becomes a sentience extinguisher spreading across the universe. So either way, regardless of, and if anyone's saying sci-fi, you're a retard. Again, like you need to actually be able to picture what happens in the bigger picture with technology like this. So whatever we build here, it's people have phrased it this way: it's the last thing we ever need to build. You either get it right and everything goes great, or you get it wrong and everything goes bad. Whatever we build, it has a massive impact on the future of reality. Unless, of course, what might happen is that other AGIs are created elsewhere in the universe, and eventually you just get a clash of AGIs at some kind of galactic level or something like that. But let's not think that far ahead. The point is just, if you think that there's this massive change coming, we should want we should want very strong consensus among experts in the field. Just like we get on topics like climate change, or among climate scientists, or on, the shape of the earth among astrophysicists. We should want that kind of consensus on what we're building being aligned with our values. If it's going to fundamentally change reality one way or the other, we need high consensus among the relevant people that it's going to be going in the right direction. You don't need to think that doom is extremely likely to have a view like that. If you think big change is coming, you need certainty that big change is going to happen in the right direction. That's sort of all there really is to it. So I just want to say that to kind of get rid of this idea that you have to think doom is like a really likely outcome in order to really want safety.
And so, okay, appreciate that point. The point getting back to where we were in terms of this situation. I don't know. I mean, I imagine different countries are trying to get to AI. I mean, it's a valuable technology. I don't know the specifics of how China is doing it, but if it is true that China is in a place where they're racing to get it, then and we don't have a way of collaborating or reliably or trustworthy collaborating with them to put sort of guardrails on this, then yeah, I mean, I would reluctantly agree that I guess we should race and get there first. Because if it's a choice, it just maximizes the probability of getting something closer to our values. It's just, okay, well, we lose somewhat of that security and the risk, but however, like, there's this added risk of they do it first, and now we're living under China values. So
yeah, I assume also, Soph, I assume you don't take issue with anything I just said. You don't actually need a high PDOOM to have a high safety concern rationally.
No, of course not. I mean, like, the way that one would calculate like an expected value here, it's going to be very, very, very smudged, because values here will be highly complicated. But like, so long as you expect it to be like highly, highly, highly destructive, which is sort of the idea of an X risk, right? It's something that causes like an immense amount of suffering, an immense amount of flourishing to be eliminated, etc. You only need like a very small probability for it to be the kind of thing that should be highly cared about. So, like, for example, right now with bird flu, one argument that has been brought up a lot is that we're sort of like not taking bird flu seriously enough, because even though there's only like a half a percentage point to 1.5% chance of epidemic over the next like year or two, the implied number of deaths of a bird flu epidemic is very, very high. So the like expected value of the number of deaths, even at like a half percentage point chance of happening, is that there will be like very, very many deaths, and we should therefore try to bring the probability of that happening way, 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 way down, as well as try and bring the number of like deaths that would happen way, 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 way down. When you consider the X risk case, you're talking about all current living beings. You're talking about future living beings. Possibly, there's a lot of lives at stake. There's a lot of value at stake. There's a lot of goals at stake. Whatever it is that you want to sort of use to base your assessment of normative terms. When you have like even like a 0.001% chance of every single person dying, the expected value of that, or the way to value that, is that like that's a lot of people dying. On the average roll of that light cone.
Right. I guess, sorry, to be clear, I did make the whole X risk point earlier, pointing out you only need a small percentage chance of a really significant event um, for it to be rational to do something about it. I guess I'm thinking right now about the case where someone argues back using X benefit, and they say, okay, well, what about the X benefit from AI? Doesn't that kind of counterbalance the X risk? And what I want to say is, like, even if we have some kind of reasoning like that, the way it looks to me is just we're talking about radically altering the future in some way. So we need a
Right.
high confidence it's going to happen in the way that we want. I think you can, even with the symmetry there, you still are it's gonna be rational to care about safety.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can be, right? I think that a lot of people are, I think negativity bias, not just because it's a, bias in the sort of, colloquial sense, but actually because that is how their value systems are ordered. That they would rather not have these like negative outcomes, and furthermore, like, you can in some circumstances just do that value calculation, and it might end up being on very many people's rational expectations that even with all the benefits, that doesn't outweigh all the suffering. And then there's other things too, like you can start bringing in deontological premises, and there's all sorts of ways to have those deontological premises interact with these sort of expected value calculations. One could say, like, it's just wrong to wipe out 8 billion people, even if we expect that there will be all these like benefits to like the kinds of images we can generate with stable diffusion, a billion or whatever, right? Like, we might not want those benefits if it means that there's a possibility every single person gets wiped out, just because of like a deontological value about not trampling on people's rights. However we want to cash that out. So there's lots of ways in which it can be like highly rational to acknowledge the benefits and nevertheless think that the overall calculation here is that we should be highly careful.
Yeah, like, even if you have a situation, like, just say it's not X anymore, or, well, I guess it's still existential, but say you make make the math simpler. It's just a 50, say it's just a coin flip of it just goes really good and everything becomes awesome. We get our Dyson sphere, or it goes really bad and we get like the consciousness extinguisher, which actually, if you think the universe is net negative, you might think the consciousness extinguisher is an improvement. I actually think I probably have that view. I know Avi doesn't have that view, but I don't think it's an improvement when you consider the like counterfactuals about could be if things went well. Obviously, we're not like David Benatar lunatics. He got reductioed into accepting this when he talked to Sam Harris, if anyone wants to go watch that, who are going to say something like that, we'd prefer a universe with no consciousness over one with infinite well-being. I mean, that would of course be insane. But say that it's just a 50-50, it's a coin flip. So we have equal chance of everything being infinitely amazing, everything being infinitely bad. I mean, to me, it still seems like, okay, I'd rather just persist in our kind of shitty middling state here and just tip that ratio way further until we know it's going to be really good. Like, we don't need to bring about the massive universe changing thing immediately. We can take our time and do it in a way that's safe, and that's going to kind of hold even if you in my mind, that's going to hold even if you balance quite a lot of things. I guess if you balance every value, it'll be analytic that you do flip a coin. But yeah, I mean, even if you, I don't know exactly how to frame this, but that I just would say that basic thing for now. Even if you go 50-50, it's a coin flip. We just shouldn't flip the coin right away. Like, let's just do our thing and change the odds more in our favor, and then do it. Am I losing you guys, or
I'm with you. I just wanted to, but I don't disagree with any of that. What I wanted to bring it back to is in terms of like the central thing here is in terms of, is anything here that's being said giving me reason to favor one party's group over another? And if we're in a situation where, I mean, so if this was tabula rasa, like this statement would give me some reason to favor the Democrat Party over the Republican, at least in the House. However, if it is the case that we're racing against China and China has their own plans and don't have a plausible pathway to collaborate globally and et cetera, and we're just in this situation, then that might be a reason for me to favor the Republican House, because if the Democrats would not do the same thing, or would do the opposite direction, put curtails in while China races to it. So I'm not really seeing. Again, I'm in the same position. It's just like a lot of washing, and it's just not a clear picture in the way that the treatment of terrorism is between these two parties.
I want to ask Soph one last thing before we go to the institutional stuff. Because the point of this conversation isn't really to settle all this. I mean, it was worth getting into these empirics, and this is part of why I brought Soph here, just so we can get a sense of things. I know she pays close attention to this stuff. But Soph, I heard you say one thing that I have never heard you say, because you're one of the most critical of Trump people that I know. Without being an ideological crazy person, so one of the most critical people who's rational, who's critical of Trump that I know. Did I hear you say Trump is extremely forward thinking? And if so, what were you saying that about?
With respect to AI versus the Republican Party.
Oh,
I think I don't think people in the Republican Party are talking about AI, but for one, Vance is very much so. Vance is like highly tied to that, sort of part of the world. Very well connected to a lot of San Francisco and a lot of the tech companies, and is very aware of X risk and has talked about it. But it's not like currently leading any sort of like policy on that front. And that's percolated to Trump talking about it. And then the other thing that I'd mentioned too, and I've mentioned this to you before, is that Ivanka Trump is actually well read on the topic as well. And it sort of like, it would be unbelievable to me that the fact that she is both very well read on the topic and also is involved in advocacy on the topic would mean that she has like never talked about it with Trump, or has like no sway in the current administration, especially if we start to see increasing signs about X risk. The fact that she is like very well read and very clued in, and is openly involved in the scene suggests to me that there's a lot more forward thinking, at least in Trump's most inner circle, than most of the Republican, if not almost all of the Republican Party. And moreover, my guess is that like Trump himself is very much so. Although Trump so far has only mostly talked about capabilities and has talked less about safety.
Okay, just curious. Okay, I think we've been through these two topics. So, I mean, our broader goal here was not even to really focus on this comment, but I guess everyone is always asking about your vote. So, I mean, it's probably good we spent forever on this. So, yeah, let's just talk about the third one, the institution thing, which is not a sufficient condition, but is still a meaningful reason for you. And then finish up your response to this comment and the other one, and then let's go, because I've been going to bed earlier and I want to go to bed and get up and stuff.
Yeah. So just quite briefly, the institutional, I believe there is an insidious takeover of leftist ideology within American academic institutions, pretty broadly, especially when it comes to the humanities areas. And by this ideology, you could put it a number of ways. You can classify it as DEI minus the Jews. That's one way of putting it. It's just like identity-based politics with some, particular exceptions of what is the wrong identity or the not so good identity without explicitly saying it, but or saying it in a politically correct way, or that sort of thing. General leftist ideology, woke policies, and that stuff. And I think that just destroys our institutions, because Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a huge barrier to entry. Like if you think about the workforce and how many different areas will just not consider your application if you don't have a college degree. Essentially, this is saying like if you want to get past this major barrier to have a job, you need to go through our ideology farm first, and that's a huge problem. Uh, to have that much of the populace go through training and have that training system come with its flavor, not a flavor, but like in some cases just straight up educating ideology. A disgusting one that I find disgusting at that is a huge concern to me. And it's very weird. Like it's that there's denial. It's weird. Like when some people when I bring this up, some people are like almost in denial about it. I hope at this point people aren't denying this. And I know I don't put a lot of weight into lived experience and anecdotal evidence, but I just can't. Some part of me just can't help because like I went to college. I saw it. I know what it's like. I know what it is to sit in a class and have a humanities teacher teach about white people bad, not as like a revolutionary point or something, but like as part of their curriculum in a very casual, accepted, like, oh, this is just a very standard, white people bad sort of thing. We're not making a grand point or anything. We're just teaching you it's like they're saying white people bad as if they're saying accepted science. This is just like a standard thing. Like I know what it is. I've been in the classroom where that happens.
Okay,
And
here's a pushback. So some people are gonna. So let's just grant that it's present in the institutions. Of course, there's people who are going to argue that it's not, but let's just grant that for now. Maybe they just say it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, people believe these kind of silly things, and there's some weird ideology getting taught, but like it's not really consequential.
yeah, it's pretty bizarre. Well, number one, it is possible that you could take over the institutions and teach something and it not be consequential. It's a possibility. I'm not sure what. First of all, the priors I have don't really go. I don't see why we should have priors at the very least to point in that direction. And I don't think anyone would have any. I don't think people would accept that in any other sort of way. So, for example, if there were a group of right wing, if the right took over the academic institutions and it was DEI minus black people, I don't think that anyone would accept. Yeah, that's just a funny sort of belief. It's not going to be really consequential, right? What's that going to do? So I don't think anyone would accept that if it were any other sort of. I don't think anyone would accept that on the other side. So so the default position is to assume like when you just brainwash a bunch of people, you set up an institution to brainwash a bunch of people, it has some sort of impact. The idea that it's not going to have any impact, I have no idea why we would think that. I have every reason to think that it would. And if it wouldn't, why we have a whole bunch of questions. Why have people develop brainwashing institutions in the first place if that's just not an impactful strategy?
Yeah, I'll tell you my general leaning. So, obviously, I can see why this would not be a sufficient condition for you, like the other two things, because the last two we've talked about are like highly consequential. But I do still aim in the same direction as you with this one, and I feel the same because I'm like, I don't know how consequential it is. I assume it probably has some shitty consequences. I don't think generally speaking it's good to just bullshitify people. Like, I mean, if the right was trying to do like some shit they used to do, like maybe they're trying to do intelligent design and stuff in universities and some big effort for that, I would not like that. I think that I guess my overall stance is just.
Well, I'll tell you. Let me just finish because I'll tell you the biggest consequence. The biggest consequence is the progression of science when you started putting guardrails on what can get published. Because taking over the academic institutions also includes peer review.
Right. You don't want to see the ideologification. It's not a real word of.
I don't want to see that hinder the progression of science.
Right. Yeah. So I guess my overall sense here is the consequences are not as obvious as with the other
Mhm.
cases, but I do speculate they're negative, and in the same kind of ways as you. I don't particularly want to produce people who are bigoted. I don't want to make science ideological and have that limit like ability to publish or anything. I'm not exactly sure how big of these consequences are, but I agreed that it's bad, and it is a reason to not want those. Well, yeah, I mean, if it's bad, you don't want those kind of policies. So yeah, I have the same valence as you, and just like you, I'm not really sure how big a deal it is, but still seems like something you wouldn't want.
And just because this is about my vote, it's an additional consideration. And yes, this is just for me. I happen to be of the ethnicity that is of the not so good ethnicity for these
Right.
for this idea. So
right, yeah, they're saying fuck you to you specifically.
yeah, it's not just like, well, I don't like this because it's like, they're singling out some race, and I don't like race. Like, yeah, I don't. It's true, I don't like that, but I don't like it. I also don't like that it's my race. Like, fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I haven't run into a whole lot of it. I'm not sure how much Soph has. Like I mean, there's some amount of political activity on campus, but in terms of being taught things, like yeah, I mean, I've had some classes, weird ones actually, like software classes where there's a whole module on like what was it, on like white privilege and on microaggressions and just all the standard shit. And I was like, why am I being taught this in a software engineering class? But I wouldn't say I've been bombarded with it. I've just it's
It's insidious.
notable.
It's not like the right wing would be too overt about it. It would be crude, unevolved. No, this sort of thing is an insidious takeover.
Well, keep in mind I'm
it's
also in STEM, right? Like I'm in software engineering, so it's
bad.
also whatever I'm seeing is less than you're going to see in other areas.
But I'm saying it's more. It's more. It's done in a more crafty way. I'm saying it's like they are, the institutions are racist. They're racist against different races than the right would. They are racist, but they go about their racism in a much more sophisticated, crafty, and politically correct way. Is what I'm saying.
See, I'm not convinced, for instance, that my institution is racist. I've seen some amount of this stuff, and I'm against it, but I'm not sure if it's really representative or if it's just certain professors. I feel like I don't have a broad enough view, but I also don't know really what it's like in the US. I don't know how bad it is.
Sure.
We see some of the scandals, and we're like, holy shit! Like, how is that?
Like hiring practices, and when you get into like some of the emails, you're saying like, I certainly wouldn't hire like a white man or something like that. Like, so those sorts of things. Yeah, there is evidence that I do believe there's evidence that, at least from what I've seen in terms of whether admissions, hiring practices, or certain like statements that have been leaked in emails of commissions of those institutions, that our institutions have a racism problem. Sorry.
Okay, so broadly speaking, seems bad, seems like it's going to have bad consequences. You're against it, but it's not a motivating factor in the same kind of way as the bigger, more serious issues you just mentioned are.
Yeah, that's right.
Just not to downplay it, racism bad, but it's not, racism isn't on par with like destroying the fucking world or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's keep going then. So you were responding to this comment. The still fuming. Yeah.
Okay. And then said, okay. So
no,
so
you're
that
not
was
a single issue voter. I think we've established that over the last 2 hours. Yeah, you're not a single issue voter. These people are just retarded. But let's move to the rest. Yeah.
Right. Vote for another country. Well, again, actually, it was a vote for. Even if I was a single issue voter, to me, this would be a vote for the planet, not just the country, including our country. As a born and raised American, yeah, this is just confused. That was covered. How is this not some double allegiance shit? Again, I don't know what this person means by double allegiance. I take it that they think I'm voting for the interests of Israel against the interests of America. I don't see it that way.
Right.
I
that begs the question against your view that the interests are aligned with respect to what you're voting on.
Exactly. So that's just something I don't accept. Holy fuck, man, was it worth it? Again, worth what? My evaluation hasn't really changed. I feel the same way as I did when I voted. To see more dead Palestinians, well, obviously that's just not an accurate representation of my motivations for voting. No, actually, a case could be made that that on what I'm advocating for, you'd see less dead Palestinians, at least in the long run.
And you don't like the idea of killing Palestinians. I mean, this goes without
No.
saying. It's a unfortunate consequence that you accept because you think there's things that are more important. People can fight you on that, but it's certainly not that you just want to see dead Palestinians. That's just some insane, demented straw man.
Yeah, correct. Like you haven't gotten your revenge. Like what is?
Yeah, no, it's just you are a single issue voter who wants revenge against Palestinians, and you just want them to die. Very, very rational.
Yeah. What the fuck is wrong with him? I am saying this as an American Palestinian who is getting double fucked by this admin. Like I don't. Side note, like I don't get it. Like I'm saying it as an American Palestinian. Like okay, I don't care who you. I don't know why you're bringing up that you're. It doesn't matter to me who you are. All right, you're getting double fucked by the. Okay, I'm not. Go live in Israel, if you don't give a fuck about this country. Okay. So, yeah, no, all of this is just confused. Oh, and then I'd rage at him personally, but the cuck has locked his Twitter account. Okay, so actually, let me address that. Yeah, I locked my Twitter account because there was a attempt to try and get me fired. By the way, for the job I currently hold. By going through my Twitter account and clipping out of context tweets and sending it to my job. So while I was dealing with that, in the interim, I locked that down. Fortunately, I am now on towards the end of my contract with fortunately, I have secured a contract where elsewhere where that's not going to be a concern, not going to be an ongoing concern, and at least from what I've seen now, I haven't seen a success on their end to try and get me fired or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, this is the sort of thing that I've been dealing with by people on the left, by the way. So that's the reason I'm not going to count. It has nothing to do with like. I don't want like as if I'm locking my account to prevent criticism or some shit, or just prevent your diarrhea raging at me. I get raged by diarrhea spewers of the emotional diarrhea spewers every other day.
And it goes without saying that, I mean, although you are not going to waste your time text debating some demented sophist retard, that of course if this person actually wants to debate, they can just go to the server with a proposition and you'll obviously just annihilate them. Like the offer is just generally open to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Boofpack Jones, we await you. I'm sure it will be a hilarious follow-up when you definitely show up for the debate that you're totally willing to have on this topic. We look forward to that future that's totally going to happen. I'm sure that'll be awesome when it happens. No sarcasm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is just a confused person.
Next comment?
Next comments.
Okay.
Interestingly, during this call, they posted this follow-up.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I will get over it. So Boothpack posted again.
Okay. Oh, my. Gotta love the double down. Oh, they have no idea the level of you think that's a double down. You don't know what's being recorded while you post that. But yeah, Boofpack, we look forward to you showing up to defend your view. I mean, you want to rage at Avi. I mean, either the rage is just empty, blind hatred, and all you have the courage to do is spew that in text or whatever. And I mean, if so, you're just a pathetic piece of shit, and you can just do that. But if all of this rage actually amounts to thinking he's wrong about something, and that you might be able to come anywhere near close to showing that, then have some courage and show up for a conversation. Do you want to go to the other comment, the main one about the derm that you wanted to actually talk about?
Yes. Yeah, that's the topic of the video.
Right. Yeah. 2 hours in. Okay.
That will be getting probably 20 minutes of cover time. Okay. we're okay, yeah, so let me put that here.
I'll read it. Way more applications to spots. Wait, is that where we're starting? We started at way more applications, right?
Yeah.
Way more applications to
Just
spots.
the context. Somehow this got into my profession. Like somehow that's how where it went in this demented thread.
Well, I
But
mean, it's
anyway,
obvious why. These people hate you and they want to just discredit you in any way possible. So they're just looking at any arbitrary feature of you and looking for some way to shit on it. And here they're fucking up and saying a bunch of stuff that turns out being wrong about derm because they're not actually doing research or looking into any of these things meaningfully, and they just want to rage, and you end up looking stupid when you do that. Way more applicants to spots because the money to work ratio is too good. MOHS and Dermpath are some of the few medical subspecialties where you can clear a million a year while still working a 9 to 5. Derm residency is also 9 to 5 with no call. That specialty's such a big brain drain, TBH, and gives insight into how the average medical student operates. Their personal statements are riddled with proclamations about wanting to be in medicine to serve the underserved. And then their specialty choices are almost entirely centered around leveraging their board scores and grades to make bank while living the cushiest life they can.
and then there's another comment.
Oh, you want the one below read also?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
why I don't call it a serious specialty. I have doctors in my family and they work so hard because for them it's about helping people first, and the money is just a nice extra. I troll often and say the dermatologists get paid hundreds of thousands a year for just saying to put on sunscreen. But you put it much more accurately. It's a no stress 9 to 5 job without on call duties, and it's filled with pretentious, money hungry pricks who don't actually care about the specialty, but only about, like you said, earning the most money possible for the least amount of work, which is no surprise why a person like Avi has chosen that specialty.
Okay, so just to start at the end there, that's not really accurate. It's not really the specialty I've chosen. I've chosen dermatopathology, not dermatology. I've chosen dermatology as a way of getting to dermatopathology, but I'm not going to be practicing clinical dermatology. So, like, for just off the bat, like, that's just not the job I'm going to be doing. Um, Furthermore, I wouldn't characterize clinical dermatopathology in that way, even in clinical dermatology in that way. But regardless of your view on clinical dermatology, to suggest Dermpath is anything like what they're suggesting is insane. And this is what I really wanted to talk about. Dermpath, because I consider Dermpath to be arguably the most cognitively engaging and cognitively demanding fields, arguably in all of medicine. And in a way that obviously clinical dermatology is not, but also other fields of pathology is not, and just other fields of medicine are not. And if there was ever a field where the competitiveness is justified beyond the work to pay ratios of the market, it would be dermatopathology. And as far as hours are concerned, since they were bringing up hours, like my situation right now where I'm working in dermatopathology, I wake up at, some of this is self-induced because I just love my job, but I wake up at 5 a.m. I work and I leave at around 7 to 8 p.m. regularly. And by the way, I'm happier to do that than when I was doing clinical dermatology, when I could even do a 9 to 3. And, with 4 days out of the week working, and, instead of a 5-day work week. And the reason is because that's just not stimulating for me. Dermpath is the only field I know where I feel alive in the sense, in a very meaningful sense. I feel like in many ways I feel like a zombie doing anything else. Every day I wake up and I am excited to go to work for that reason. And people have a lot of people will never get that for one day. And so, yes, there's a decent chance that I may be clearing $1 million a year doing what I love. Sorry, you're going to be clearing less doing what you love less. I'm sorry. Anyway, but what I wanted to really talk about is why some people don't really understand. They hear Dermpath and they think it's like, oh, well, that's like clinical dermatology. Now, just to be clear, I don't accept this characterization of characterization of clinical dermatology, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about Dermpath and why I think Dermpath, what's different about Dermpath that makes it so much more cognitively demanding than other fields of medicine. So there's a couple of things. So first, and this is not the most important reason, but first, it's just the nature of the profession is a cognitive one. Your job is to figure things out. Your job is to diagnose. You need to figure out what happened. You need to figure out what the patient has. The information it's like information is being provided to you. You need to take information and use your brain to figure out and generate an answer. And that's true in a lot of other fields of medicine, but there's other stuff that comes along with it. There's all sorts of, either procedural things that are just bread and butter type of procedures that are cognitively demanding, but it can be put on cruise control to some degree. Or getting information. Like your task is not just to take information, make a diagnosis, but to extract information. So during like a patient interview, you need to acquire information from a patient. And yes, that's to some degree cognitively demanding, but it is demanding in a very different way than just a pure cognition test of here's the information, what can you do with it? But the main reason that Dermpath is very unique is that there is a linear balance there, or at least a very strong balance between the complexity of the case and the time that you can spend on it, that you're going to devote to it. And there is some relationship between that and other fields, but not to the degree that Dermpath has. So, for example, if you are seeing a patient clinically, whether you're in clinical dermatology or internal medicine or surgery or anything, if it's a very simple case, you probably will spend less time with that patient. But there's some sort of a minimum amount of time you're going to spend. If you walk into the door and you know what the patient has and you know what to do about it, you can't just walk into the door and just walk out the next second. You won't get follow-up. No one's going to see you that way. The patient will get offended. They'll feel like you didn't pay attention to them. They'll feel like, it's just not going to work. You have to go in and there's like a minimum amount of time you have to spend with the patient, even if you know what the patient has and you know exactly what to do about it. You need to have, and then you go again, you put a smile on your face, you have a good bedside manner, you make some chit chat with the patient. So there is some amount of time you're going to take, even if everything is all said and done. That is the sort of thing that is not intellectually stimulating, at least for me. That is the sort of like cruise control mode, zombie mode that I could get into, people could get into. What is different about
zombie mode forever? There's people who get a lot out of obviously these more.
When I say zombie,
yeah,
yes,
I know what you mean. I understand. I'm not trying to contradict anything you say. I understand if you were doing that, it would all the human elements of it would be kind of just autopilot because you're doing that because you have to. Really, the interesting thing to you is the intellectual stuff, the doing the diagnosis and whatnot, not the human element. It's not that you don't care. It's just not your cup of tea. I'm just pointing out there's some people.
Even if I did care, I'm saying even if I did care and it was my cup of tea, it would be zombie mode in the sense of like lacking intellectual stimulation.
Well,
it would just have a different form of stimulation.
Yeah, but I'm just pointing out there's other, and I'm sure you agree with this. I mean, there's other people who it's not zombie mode for them. They find it really activating because it's got a human dimension, and they like that. That's a big draw.
Sure, I'll just say intellectually stimulating, cognitively demanding. Like I'll say it that way. Demanding in terms of your ability to use your brain to figure shit out. Like yeah. So. Yeah, because regardless of whatever your view of that type of interaction is, you're not going to really characterize that as a equivalently cognitively demanding task when you go in to see the patient just to make chit chat with them.
No, the only reason I said it, just sorry to cut in, it's just the only reason I say it is just I don't like the thought of people accidentally because I know you don't actually think this, but people getting the image that doctors don't care about them. They're just there because they have to be doing some minimal amount of interaction with the patient. They really just want to get the fuck out of there. Like, obviously you're not saying that, but I'm just picturing how people will misperceive what you're saying because you're expressing your own personal preferences about that aspect of doing medicine. Obviously, as you know, there's tons of doctors who even if it's not the most intellectually challenging thing for them or intellectually challenging at all, who have a great deal of joy that they get from that and take pride in doing it well and highly value forming those personal
Of course.
connections and everything.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah. So because there is that, here, this is important because there is that minimum required time that one needs to spend on the non-complex or less complex cases. There is just this. It is just forced that there's going to be a certain, like, a lot of amount of your time is just going to be devoted to non-cognitively demanding tasks.
Right.
What's different about Dermpath is it's a very high volume case structure, and the time, and there isn't really that sort of restriction. So if there is a very simple case, I don't have to. It's a slide. I don't have to talk to a person. I just look at the slide and the diagnosis is made in like a couple seconds, and then I'm on to the next. Now, I mean, imagine if you could do that with. So obviously, if you could do that with patients, then the cognitive complexity would change of that profession. So if you were to just, okay, next patient, now we got to the complicated one. Let's figure this out. Then you would have a different degree of complexity. The human element would be taken out. There would be cost to it, but the complexity would increase. But that's not something that's present in clinical medicine. So as a non-clinician, having that time matchup where I can just look at the complicated case, devote the proportionally appropriate amount of time to cognitively demanding cases. And as far as the simple cases go, it's still cognitively demanding because although they may be simple, I'm signing them out in far less time. So that also just becomes cognitively demanding just because you're able to do it in seconds. So yeah, I'm using, even then you're using your brain to, you're devoting your mental RAM to doing something that can stimulate you because you're just like, okay, well, these may be a bunch of simple cases, but how quickly can I get through them or something?
And you're incentivized to smash out as many as you do as quickly as possible because you get paid more the more volume you do.
Yes.
At least in your contract,
yeah. That's true. Well, yes, there's different contracts at different dermatopathologists, but many dermatopathologists do have contracts that have some sort of incentivization bonus. So, but based on volume,
right.
or some sort of thing that's close to that sort of tracks volume. Yeah. So, and of course, you want to also do all this while not being careless. Of course, you want to. You don't just want to speed through cases and you put yourself at risk and the patient at risk if you do that. So it's basically to maintain accuracy while maintain accuracy and speed, simply put. But what allows you to do all this is that time balance between complexity of the case and the time spent on the case. So I'm able to maintain the cognitive demand by going through simple cases quickly, because, or more aptly put, going through the less complex cases in the appropriate amount of time it takes to diagnose those less complex cases. There's no added amount of fluff time. There's no added amount of time where I'm talking to the to the slide and saying, "How are you doing today? How was your day?"
Right. It's
so,
just you flow state, infinite derm cases flying at you, doing them basically.
Yes. And then when I get to the complicated case, then I also, you get to the complicated cases faster, by the way, so that's just another thing. If you're able to have the appropriate cut out all the fluff time, you get to the more complicated cases quicker, and then you devote your cognition to the complicated case. So you're basically just devoting you're putting the cognition to where the cognition goes, and it's just that. It's not. It's your time is not spent on the non-cognitive tasks.
It's keeping you engaged. You're not having your flow state constantly broken by having to like manage human elements or slow down or do random shit. You can do case after case, get to the complicated, interesting cases faster because you're clearing more at a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your
And now,
interest is just keeping a constant, steady stream of stuff that's intellectually stimulating coming at you, basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
And now, in terms of other fields of pathology, what's different? So you might say, okay, well, what about other fields of pathology? Because they don't have the human element either, or at least not. They're lacking in that. But the difference is in other fields of pathology, they don't have high case volume. Instead, what they have is they have less amount of cases, but the cases are larger. So they'll have more tedious cases where it's like a large, massive excision, and they're just spending an hour looking at the same specimen for margins or something. So that is also not in the human element, but it's also just that sort of field in pathology, or those sorts of fields in pathology are not as cognitively stimulating because it's just a tedious task. You're not looking at anything new. You're just looking at the same sort of tissue, and you're just looking for tumor at every section. And it's just a massive chunk of blocks. It's just a massive section, and you're just doing this repetitive task. Not to say that Dermpath doesn't have margin calls either. We do, but they're just not even comparable. So if I was just doing margin calls all day, where I'm just looking at a large chunk of tissue and I'm not trying to figure anything out, I'm just trying to look to see if there's a tumor that I already know what it looks like in any section, then that would not be cognitively demanding.
Right. That's like just playing like Where's Waldo or something.
Yeah, exactly. If I was
not
just
to
playing,
minimize it, obviously, I'm sure it's highly complicated, takes a bunch of skill, but it's closer to Where's Waldo than what you're doing.
Exactly. And what's unique about Dermpath is Dermpath, of all the fields of pathology, Dermpath just has that the least amount of that element. It's just most amount of novel single accession cases where you'll just like, okay, this is just a brand new thing. Diagnose, what is it? Next, diagnose, what is it?
Right.
It's very little of the it's. So that's the main reason, and it just the way it works out. I mean, there's other reasons also, like in terms of just the nature of the field. There's for whatever reason, there's like an incredibly steep learning curve. The ceiling is through the roof. Like, unlike other specialties, like you just don't age out unless you get dementia or something. You'll just keep getting better at it until you just die, which is really kind of crazy. Maybe there are other fields like that, but yeah, I mean, but that I think is the main reason I think that Dermpath is just the most cognitively demanding, because you can make it that way, and it is that. It's just that's the way that the market ends up driving it to be. It's just the nature of the field where you just have that advantage of appropriate timing, where that you just don't have elsewhere. The time your brain is spent on a case appropriately matches the complexity of the case.
Is there anything else to get at in this highly intellectual comment here?
No, I think I'm good on that. This is really for those in my community that are curious about this sort of stuff. I don't expect to convince anyone or much of anyone in making these comments in that in this Reddit.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. And this also, I don't know how characteristic this is of Destiny's community. Like, I mean, I have fucking some insane, crazy people in my community. So do you. So, I mean, I'm not sure.
Look, there's obviously a selection bias. Like the people who, who are motivated enough to devote their lives of making posts about how they're still fuming about Avi, are going to be of a certain nature, like that, a subset. So there's a selection bias there. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Wait. What? But all I'm saying, I'm just trying to point out.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. Maybe I didn't understand you. These people don't necessarily. I mean, I highly doubt Destiny thinks any of this retarded shit himself, or is the source of this. I bet the only thing is he's really strongly anti-Trump, and so he has people in his community who really hate Trump, and then when they see you actually hating Trump yourself, but for whatever reason voting that way, there's some crazy hate spillover onto you. But just to be clear, I don't think any of the specifics of the kind of shit they're saying about you is driven by or probably agreed with by Destiny.
I've seen no reason to think that. No, I just no. There's always look. That's just when you have a community large enough, there's going to be people like that. So yeah, I mean that's really all I have to say about those comments. All right, anything else you guys want to add?
Nothing from me. You got anything, Sophia?
No, I think like I've said my views about all this in Avi server. Like I think I don't know whether or not the way that Avi presents it is intentionally a honey trap or not, but I think this
Oh,
is like an
you should talk about that because I've seen it. I think that's valuable to mention. So just to clear the record, I have no desire to present honey trap views, but I can see why it ends up being a honey trap view. So I actually think you put it very well. So I think you should actually talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's a honey trap for poor reasoning, which is funny because it's like there's a lot of things in there's like another term that I've heard someone use, but I can never find like what the reference is. But I think they like tied it into the marshmallow test and just the idea that like there can be like debate views sometimes that like they present themselves as just so appealing to people who can't like rationalize like maybe that they should consider this. But I did continue that discussion on later, and I guess like I think I don't know if I like fully buy the view, but like I understand the argument, and I think like my disagreements are like I don't understand what they are. I think that it's mostly like values, and like I have this like very strong apprehension to the Trump administration for other reasons.
Wait, I'm talking before we go. Talk about like no, I meant to talk about why to explain why it could be a honey trap view for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, like, I just think people aren't actually willing to even look at the logic of the argument. I think people are jumping to conclusions, and I think like in that sense, it ends up being a honey trap for poor reasoners because I think that they disagree with the conclusion but have not paid attention to any of the premises.
So the point is that they're going to say things like, "Oh my God, well, how could you? What do you think about RFK and his anti-vax user? And what do you think about
the reason it's a honey trap is because the reasons typically associated with having the view you have are retarded.
Yeah, that and just like because I think if you actually listen to what it is obvious saying, you at least have to buy that it's niche, and that's sort of where I was going. Is like even though I disagree or nuanced rather. Because even though I think I disagree with you, like I think that it's a highly nuanced view and it's one that like challenges me. And I think that like when I see people who just like are like, nah, Avi is like out to lunch. I think that what people should do is consider that this is like, and I'll sound like I'm blowing smoke, but like this is a person who's like usually fairly logical, usually fairly researched, usually does not flip-flop views, and is presenting this view openly. I don't think like your immediate conclusion should be that there's like some like kind of like crypto fascism thing here, or like that Avi is just like having like a like manic episode or something like that. I think like your view should be like, okay, well what was the rationale, right? And like how does that relate to my goals and my views and my values? And it might end up being that like you agree with all the empirics of that Avi presents, and you just have like such disparate values. like you said earlier, like maybe someone that disagrees with Avi because they're like a crazy antinatalist who is like, no, actually I do want Hamas to kill everyone, like right. Like that there might be a reason to vote for Harris on that premise, but
so just because one thing I find a lot.
Well, I was just gonna say the person you called it a honey trap to was the thing that they, when you first made that point, the thing that they had said is, well, Avi must just be some kind of sycophant for Trump.
Right.
Which is hilarious because he basically thinks Trump is a retard who's just right by fluke here or there. It just happens to be right by fluke on some of the right things.
Yeah, and but
presumably the reason it works like a honey trap is because they're super polarized against Trump, and typically the arguments that you get, or at least a lot of the time, the arguments you get for Trump voting are demented. Like maybe like you mentioned RFK, but we've seen a lot of the kind of things people will say. So I mean, that's just gonna bait people in. It's gonna cause them to rage and assume you've done some stupid thing. But like Sophia said, if someone with a bit more reasoning would go like, well, it seems super implausible that that's what's going on with Avi. He must have some kind of reasoning, and I should like figure out what that is, and then make my assessment based on that.
Yeah, because here's what I excuse me. Here's
Am I
what I
defining a honey trap right? A honey trap is like, well, I guess I can just look it up. Honey trapping is a practice involving the use of romantic or sexual relationships for. Wait, 1 second. Romantic or sexual relationships for interpersonal, political, or monetary purpose.
Yeah, I think what I more meant was like honey pot or like marshmallow
honey,
trap or
honey
something
pot.
like that.
Yeah, honey pot involves making contact with an individual as information or resources required by a group or individual. The trapper will seek to entice the target into a false relationship in which they can glean information or influence over the target. That's kind of weird because that's not how it's used in tech. You're using it like it's used in tech, right? Where it's like, this site is an FBI honeypot. Well, I guess it is kind of like that. There's
So like when I
site,
think
the
of honeypot,
FBI,
I think of like when people present like it'll be like a service that pretends to be like a vulnerable like attack surface, and then like people will swarm it to attack it, but
Right.
like not realize that what they're attacking, there is like sort of the like a facade of something broader. But it's also related to this other idea too.
Well, wait, before you get to the other idea, or the other case, maybe the FBI takes over a site and then they like some kind of porn site or illegal market or something on the dark web, and then they instead of shutting it down, actually run it and entrap all the people who go to it. So the site is making that relationship with people, baiting them in, but really they're gonna all end up getting charged and going to jail.
Yeah, and there's this other idea too that I like sort of had in mind. I forget what the term is. I need to find it someday. But someone said it to me once, where the idea is that you just have these like arguments sometimes that come up, these views that come up that like people can't stop thinking about, even though they won't like think about it rationally. And sometimes they're just presented just to like get people to like focus on that for amusement. And I'm not accusing Avi of like doing it intentionally, but I think like in this case, like for poor reasoners, this view is funny because I think like poor reasoners will just continuously like want to figure out why, and sometimes they'll come to like these crazy explanations in this thread, but they just can't get off their mind, even though the answer is like right there. Like they can just look at it in Avi's perspective with respect to Avi's values, and maybe you disagree with Avi's values, but I don't think that Avi's like being opaque or like crypto about any of his values. And I think like Avi said, like I think that there's some things here that a lot of people actually might want to consider, even if they like don't care about Israel, even if they don't care about Jews. Like there's like concepts here that are relevant to all different sorts of classes of people. Like some people will want to take the like anti-woke view very seriously. Some people will want to take the anti-X risk view very seriously. And I imagine that actually like a lot of people will want to take all three of the views very, very seriously.
Yeah, so because it's one thing like when people talk to me about my vote, and I try to explain the reasons to them, they present all these things as if I'm going to disagree with them. Like they talk about RFK as if it's like as if they expect me to defend RFK. Like they'll talk about well, what about when Trump went against the court? Like as if they expect me to defend Trump doing that. Like
yeah, they think that you are going to just you're just going to be a general Trump supporter who just globally supports his policies and thinks what he's doing is smart. And it's like, no, you have this like highly nuanced take about some really specific things that he's right basically by fluke on, for all you can tell.
Yeah, it's sort of like with my like thing that I like, I'll always mention to people who care a lot about Canadian housing that like the Conservatives are probably your best vote in this election. And it's totally by accident. Like they don't have like a nuanced empirical view of housing markets. They just have lucked into the fact that like it really just is a supply constrained market, and whichever party supports the market better is going to be better for housing. Similarly with like the Trump thing, it's like if you care a lot about X risk, it just happens to be that Trump is so like, because so many things are a wash, and the one thing that is different on is actually like fairly relevant in the case of terrorism. Like it just ends up being that as a fluke, the party that like, look, even if they don't do anything about terrorism, they're at least moving like the Overton window towards being anti-terrorist in a way that like the US has not been in like the past decade probably. that it might end up just being like really valuable to vote Trump with respect to some values.
Right. Yep. I think this is a good note to end on. Anyone's got any last words?
No, I agree. I think we should. I think it's good to call it there.
All right. Okay. P implies Q, and have a good day.